Greetings, welcome to the Diabetic Mogul podcast. On this podcast, we will offer standard and recommended practice of not only managing your diabetes goal, but how you can get involved in advocating for proper access to healthcare and bringing opportunities within the diabetes online community. It's Tino, a patient advocate and a certified diabetes educator.
I'm Hona. I'm a recently graduated medical doctor. Together, we want to raise awareness, open a discussion about diabetes, share ideas, thoughts, different perspectives, and overall create a safe environment for everyone who needs to express his or her thoughts.
We'll be hosting a series of podcast episodes from people living with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare providers, researchers, and we encourage you to get involved, get engaged, and come up together to create the change that we need.
So, hello everyone. It's a Diabetic Mogul podcast. We have Jade with us here today. Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Jade Byrne, otherwise known as Pricks, a Pricks official on social media. That's what people know me as. I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a producer in theatre and film. I wrote a play called Pricks, which was incredibly successful, which was a very non-self-indulgent one-woman show all about my life with type 1 diabetes. It made you laugh, it made you cry, and it did super well and toured for quite a few years. I went on to write the children's book Daisy Donald, which is also about a type 1 superhero, and Pricks the film, which is a short film which we've managed to put together, which is hitting the festival circuit this year, and then hopefully we'll have somewhere where you can all find it in the future. I have a Pricks product shop also. So I'm a person with type 1 diabetes, I'm a creative person, I'm a storyteller, and I've used that to kind of my advantage in order to kind of remove the world's ignorance around type 1. So I try and do it in a really fun and entertaining way. A day in my life, first thing I usually do after snoozing my alarm a couple of times is check my blood sugar on my Dexcom. So I've got a Dexcom G6, so I just check my phone. Speaking of which, I might have a little look right now. Yeah, I just check my phone, just check what it's doing. Oh, it's great. I give myself a little bolus if I need one, if I'm a little bit high. And I've got 2 kids with lots of additional needs and special educational needs. So it's always a little bit kind of unpredictable, my life. Every day is very unpredictable. I don't have the same old routine, but mornings can be tricky. So it can be, I never quite know what I've got on a morning with the kids. Usually I make sure that I'm the last to be ready. I'm the last to do my stuff because I make sure everyone else is ready and in their right places, and then it comes to me. And then it's usually a cuppa. Started drinking decaf. I don't drink caffeinated coffee anymore because I realised it was spiking my blood sugar a lot. So I usually have a cup of coffee. At the moment I'm being really good, so some fruit, something like that for breakfast, and then I just crack on with my day. My day's never the same. I use Omnipod Dash as my insulin pump, moving to Omnipod 5 as soon as it's available. I don't think it's going to be long now. No day's ever the same. Depends whether I'm working. If I'm working, I probably have better blood glucose levels when I am working because it's kind of I know what I've got a pattern to do my day. I know what's happening that day. Otherwise, if I'm not working that day, I'm picking up kids, taking them to dance, gymnastics, you know how it is. And in between, trying to fit in writing new stuff and new plays and things like that. At the moment, I'm writing, and I should have been doing it today, but it didn't go to plan because my daughter didn't go to school very well this morning. It took a while. I should have been writing the script for Daisy Donald because we're turning the book into a family show, but I haven't quite got onto that today. So yeah, every day's different.
Yeah, that was interesting. Different morning, different days. Speaking of my experience, most type 1 diabetic approach diabetes from the medical field, from the scientific field, law, advocacy, but you approach diabetes from art. You raise awareness and you create content through art. So could you first explain your diabetes journey, your diagnosis, your treatment, and how there was a need that made you create things about diabetes from art? Could you talk to us about that?
So I was 4 when I was diagnosed. It was 1989. I was only 4 years old. It was quite different back then. Luckily, my mum had recognised the symptoms and she'd recently read an article about type 1 diabetes, and all of a sudden I started showing all the typical symptoms, particularly, and I'd been unwell. I'd had a really bad cold just before this. I was tired and I'd lost weight. So my mum took me to the doctors. Doctor thought she was a bit mental, like assuming it was type 1. He said to her, no, it won't be that. It'll probably be a water infection. She went, I want to test it. I'm not leaving this doctor, the surgery, unless you test her. So the doctor did. It was back in the day where they wouldn't do a finger prick to test for that. They would do an actual, I think it was a blood test they did. It had to, whatever it was they did went away and then it was a couple of days later it came back. Turned out I had type 1. So I grew up in a time where you had 2 injections a day. You were advised to test your blood sugar before each meal and before you go to bed, I think. 4 times a day you would prick your finger. It kind of evolved over time through secondary school. I was still only on 2 injections a day then, but I moved to, I think I started insulin pens partway through primary school. I was probably 9, 10 when I started insulin pens. I was on the dial-up syringes before that, that was me flicking the air bubble out. So I moved to insulin pens and was still finger pricking. I think I was about 15 when the doctor first mentioned an insulin pump to me, but I was absolutely adamant I didn't want one. I didn't get one until I was 29, I think I was, when I got my insulin pump. It took a long time to persuade me, but it's the best thing I ever did. I went on Omnipod, Eros as it was back, and I was still finger pricking up until 2018 when I had the Libra for a few months, and then I moved to Dexcom G6 because I was having a lot of nighttime hypos. And then since then I've moved from Eros to Omnipod Dash. So I'm on Dash and G6 at the moment, Dexcom G6. I think the most wonderful things in the world. All this technology is so fantastic. I can't wait to close the loop. I'm really looking forward to that. Was always into the arts when I was a kid. Always loved going to the theatre, loved dancing, loved dressing up. I had a bit of an obsession. 7, 8 years old, I was obsessed with Elvis. I used to dress up as Elvis. Every family party, I'd be dressed as Elvis, singing Hound Dog to everyone. So I've always liked performing. I love performing. In fact, that's like the one thing that makes me happiest in the world is when I'm on stage or even behind a camera. But I think that when you've got a live audience in front of you, that's the best kind of thing. Always loved performing. Was working for a company in Darlington that brought small scale theatre to the town, met loads of different companies creating loads of fabulous plays, and decided I wanted to do something myself. I was like, I want to write my own play. I didn't know what it was going to be about at first. And then I was at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the big theatre festival, the international festival. I was having a glass of wine when I realised, and I'd just seen a show that was really inspiring by a girl I love. The show was Hairpiece, and Victoria Melody was the artist, and she really inspired me. And I was writing down ideas for what could I make a show about. Then I realised that my blood sugar was low. I finger pricked. I don't know what I was, 3.2 or something. I was in the 3s, I think. I was having a hypo, basically. That was when it twigged. That's what I need to write about. I love it. I've always loved people who ask questions. If I'm sat on a train, because I tend to travelling by train to auditions and things, not so much now. If anyone asked me about what I was doing, if I was finger pricking, I used to love sitting and educating them about it. Like my own children, I find it hard to focus. I'm definitely a little bit ADHD, a little bit. For me to learn, I need visual stuff. And actually, I thought this is a perfect opportunity. Let's write a show that's really entertaining. That's was the priority was that it was entertaining and then it would educate so that people would learn without actually realise they were learning. That's how come Pricks came about. And then since then, that's how come everything's come about. I don't really know. I've discovered the diabetes online community. I've continued to do stuff ever since. At some point, I might change subject and go on to something. I've got lots of other things I could write about, but right now I'm still there and I still will continue. That's the plan. I'll continue to go out there and create art, whether that's theatre, film, stories that will educate and hopefully make another person with type 1 diabetes feel better and feel kind of they can relate to it and feel comforted by it as well. That's always kind of the core thing that's behind everything that I've done, is that I make someone else feel much happier who's like me, kind of thing.
Pursuing a career in a competitive domain, having type 1 diabetes, through decades that awareness and accessibility weren't that popular. Have you experienced discrimination, any obstacles or burdens regarding your diabetes?
Professionally, no, I haven't. In all honesty, there's obstacles, I haven't had any discrimination, I would say. No, I would say I've been very lucky in that respect. But I think that's partly down to the type of person I am. If anyone tried, they'd have a fight on their hands with me. But having said that,
did you have to hide parts of your disease to avoid this?
No, that's the thing.
No?
I have never ever gone for a part and told them at the audition that I have diabetes. They will know that now because they look at my CV, they look at my spotlight as it is in the UK, and they see, oh, she's done this, and it's all to do with type 1 diabetes. They'll know, they can tell now. But prior to doing Pricks and Pricks the film, now Daisy Donald, but people wouldn't have known because I wouldn't tell them, because I wouldn't want it to possibly be a barrier to me getting the job. So I would always get the job, and then when every acting job you do, you then get medical forms to fill in, and then I would put it on the forms. And that they would end up in court, wouldn't they? If they tried to then say, oh, you can't do this job after offering me the job, it would be a different scenario. So yeah, I suppose the opposite of what I do now, and I don't hide it at all. I talk about it all the time, and in my everyday life, I would never hide it. But when I used to go to an audition, I would make sure that they couldn't see insulin pump, which is really, it's always really easy to hide the Omnipod because you put it on my leg or somewhere, but on my tummy. But yeah, I would not tell them about the diabetes unless it was necessary to. Only when I've got the job would I tell them. And it's just meant that I've had to, at times, like when I've been touring in shows, I always have some sort of hypo treatment hidden somewhere. So in Pricks, the play, it was in one of the drawers. I always had apple juice in one of the drawers. When I was touring with a play called Apples, I remember having it, I had on each wing a bottle of Lucasade, because back then Lucasade was good for hypo treatment, not so good now, but it still works, but you just need more. So I've always had stuff hidden on stage when I've done stuff like that. Jobs I've done since, it's never come across, like costumes have never been an issue. I've never had to wear anything, like I've never had to do a scene in a bikini, so I haven't had to like hide my Omnipod or hide my Dexcom ever. So I've been quite lucky in that respect. But I'm a yes person. My answer to most questions, so a version of yes. Like there's always a way around something. Every cloud has a silver lining. There's always a fix. There's always something that you can make work. I've always kind of just been me, and it's not stopped me from doing anything, because I won't let it stop me. My mum would never have ever let diabetes stop me from doing anything. So I think that's just how I am as an adult. I don't. It will work. If you want to try and tell me that I can't do something, then I will show you. You will know about it that I can.
It's important sometimes set our limitation and set our character, set our needs, and respect ourselves so that others do to us. That was important. No matter how technology has advanced, we still have ups and downs as diabetics. We don't have flat lines.
Absolutely.
Have probably in some years, but that's not the case now. And you've described the ups and downs with a plain illustration. Could you reflect to that?
So yeah, the analogy in Prick's short film is the doctor is explaining to little Jade about what type 1 diabetes is, and we used a plane. So she says basically most of us have autopilot. Those that don't have diabetes, their pancreas works on autopilot. It just does what it has to do. But with type 1 diabetes, you don't have autopilot and you have to be the pilot yourself. So it can, if you sometimes have got too much sugar, the plane can go too high, and that's not good for altitude, and that can cause issues. And then if it goes too low, it can come plummeting down. Well, that's a hypo and you can crash. Yeah, it's all about keeping it at a safe altitude is the analogy in Prick's short film. But it is very much like that though, isn't it? It's very much like being the pilot of your own pancreas. Like you have to keep it at a steady level and make sure the altitude's right at all times. Yeah, definitely still have ups and downs despite the technology. I think we all have those days where our blood sugar just cannot decide what it wants to be. It doesn't want to be in the middle, just wants to be either up here or down there. If our graphs were a roller coaster, they'd be the best roller coaster ever, because it'd be just like some days. But no, that's the analogy we use. It's like being a pilot. There's another analogy that didn't make the cut of the film. It was a scene we took out, and it was to do with describing what type 1 diabetes is. It wasn't about the highs and lows of blood sugar. It's like being locked out of your car. So let me try and get the analogy right. I don't want to get it wrong. So it's basically in the film, what we had, it was raining heavy, which we used, our producer made a rain machine basically for us. And we had a hose pipe and all that. So it was heavy rain. I was locked between the car and the house. I didn't have the keys. Couldn't get in the house and I couldn't get in the car. Just like what we need insulin for. Like if your pancreas stops working, you're basically trapped and you can't get what you need to get to the places it needs to get to. I wish I could remember the words exactly. If I get a chance while we're doing this, I'll have a quick look and I'll tell you exactly what it was, because I didn't describe it very well there. But yeah, I do like using an analogy to describe things, because actually I love an analogy in life because it's more creative, isn't it? The plain analogy is how we describe the highs and lows of having type 1.
I think that is important concerning health communication, how to simplify medical terms to
Yeah.
patients and especially kids, where you have to create an animation, a cartoon, or something to make diabetes more understandable to a patient or a type 1 diabetic.
And that's something that's in my pipeline. So we're making the family show, the theatre show of Daisy Donald, but further down the line, we want to make it an animation. That's what I learned. So the reason why I made the film was because it was lockdown and all of a sudden I couldn't go out to theatres, or I couldn't do what I do anymore. I need to make a short film version of this so it's accessible to everyone, kind of thing. And I want to do the same with Daisy Donald at some point. I think she should be a kid's cartoon in some way or another.
You have said that my diabetes is not who I am. I want you to explain this.
My diabetes doesn't define me. I am Jade, an actress, I'm a writer, I'm a mum. It's a part of me that's never going away, but it doesn't make me who I am. We're not. So it's a bit like the kind of, in the UK, they've had this probably 2 or 3 years ago now, they had the NHS had this Language Matters document created, and it was about how you can't call a person, as a medical professional, you can't call a person with diabetes a diabetic, because they're not just a diabetic, they're more than that. They are a person with type 1 diabetes. It's a bit like disability. If you say someone is a disabled person, that's not really correct. You should say they're a person with a disability, because they are more than just their disability, just like diabetes. It definitely does define some of my personality. It's made me a really resilient person, I believe. I think it's made me quite feisty, quite strong, because we have a lot of stuff to deal with every day, but it isn't who I am. I'm not type 1 diabetic, I'm Jade. It contributes to who I might come across like, it contributes to my personality. It doesn't define me. That's the point in that line in the film.
It's always important to remember we can disconnect from the definition of type 1 diabetic if we want to.
I sometimes, even to this day, I've had it almost 34 years. I will sit down sometimes and eat a meal and start eating, and then suddenly go 5 minutes into it, go, oh, I forgot, I've got diabetes. I need to check my blood sugar. I'm adding insulin. I've just started, and I've just, because I'm hungry. And I do forget.
We have to say that we must disconnect in ways that aren't dangerous.
Yes, obviously. But no, you have to be more than your diabetes. Don't let it control your whole life. Look after it, but it isn't all that you are.
You seem to me, now that we're talking more, a very solid character, a very conscious person. But you work in a field that you have to act different roles, and you have been acting with different roles. How do you keep that balance, and what have you learned from acting and all this career that you're pursuing?
I don't know if I do keep the balance. I don't know if I actually managed to do that. I do lots of different roles, lots of different jobs. It's more important to do what you love. Don't give up on a passion. Don't let anything stop you from achieving anything. There are always barriers, but then people always say there's barriers, but I like to always think of barriers as hurdles. They're just hurdles. You can get over them. And you might have to do it many, many times. Don't ever let it stop you. What I've learned is that I can have a successful career and live with type 1 diabetes at the same time. I can do exciting things. Yes, the adrenaline affects my blood sugar levels, like when I'm on stage and things like that. But you just ride the roller coaster, don't you? That's what you have to do. You've got to ride the type 1 roller coaster and just deal with it. Can't let it ever stop you in any way.
That's great. You are ambassador of some of the biggest organizations. I know Dexcom, Omnipod, and JDRF. How do you feel representing these organizations?
An absolute privilege to do that is an honour, a total honour. JDRF are a charity so close to my heart. Whenever I was touring Pricks the show, I always at the end spoke to the audience and told them 2 important buckets on the way out. One was important, but one was really super important. And the super important one was the JDRF collection bucket. And I always told them about it, and I always used to get a bit emotional every time I talked about it. And I was like, but it's just a charity that's so close to my heart. So when they asked me to be an ambassador, I think I cried. I was so honoured to have been asked, so honoured and so thrilled. I'm an ambassador for Dexcom and Intellect too. do, which is lovely. I love my insulin pump. I love Dexcom. I say Dexcom keeps me alive on a daily basis. Yeah, to get to represent them and sometimes be invited to go and like talk on like a patient panel for them and things like that is really lovely. It's just an absolute honour to be ambassador for them. I think that's the best way to describe it. Very happy that I was asked to be.
Having people with diabetes present themselves and take part in patient panel, it's very important. I would like you to explain about your urge to create the pricks. How did that came out?
Are we talking about Pricks the play, the original, or are we talking about the film? Right, the play.
Yeah, the play. And if you want to explain about the film as well, whichever you
Well,
think.
with the play, I had really great parents who always made my life easier. But I came across other type 1s. I did a lot of research and I met with loads of over 50 other type 1s or parents of type 1s who hadn't had the positive experiences I'd had. It was, let's get this out there, let's see. And it was my first ever play that I'd written. I thought it would like not do very well. And it ended up doing incredibly well, getting best solo show in the Northeast with British Theatre Guide. Well, I started it in 2018 and I finished it in 2022. Normally, a small scale theatre piece like that might tour for a year, maybe 2 if it's lucky. But no, to tour for that long and to have theatres still wanting to book it, but me saying, actually, no, I'm done now, was incredible. But yeah, I just wanted to be able to educate people. I wanted to remove the world's ignorance. I think on my first funding application for it, I was fed up with misunderstandings, misdiagnoses, and it's going to annoy me that can't third. It was 3 misses, and I said I want to remove the miss in all of these terms. I want Pricks to help remove the miss. I want it to educate it and make sure that people do understand that doctors do pick up, or medical professionals do pick up on the symptoms. I want to remind the world what that was, but also let them know actually it's really a relentless condition. It isn't easy, but we can still crack on and do everything. It doesn't stop us, basically. So I think that was the point of creating it. I found my script, by the way. I'm just trying to find a little bit about getting locked out of your house, between your house and your car, because I want to make sure. Here we go. So the voiceover would have said this at this point. To provide energy to our bodies, insulin unlocks our cells to let sugars or glucose inside. But my key's gone. So she couldn't find a car key at this time. My vehicle for transport grounded. So the car was like representing the insulin. Glucose will build in my bloodstream and that can be fatal. With type 1, there is no natural key anymore. And then it went on to say that I need a lifelong substitute. And then there was some like other little squeamish bits. I won't go into all the details. So she was stuck between the key and the car was signifying the insulin, like there's no mode of transport. And then we went to a drain that was overflowing from the rain. That point was when it went over the gate. It was supposed to, if it had stayed in the film, I remember being so thirsty. But when I did drink, expecting the world to satisfy my thirst, it never did, kind of thing. And you could see the drain kind of overflowing with water. But we actually removed that. But I think we might use that content for something else. I love an analogy. Sorry, I went completely off on a tangent there because I'd managed to get the script up.
No, that's okay. That's great. We want the script. Lastly, before leaving you, I would like to ask you what keeps you going? You're active in so many projects. You're a mother, you have type 1 diabetes, you represent various organizations. What keeps you going and how do you deal with maybe your downs?
Now that I am going, it is the people that know Pricks. It is the type 1 community that keep me going, keep me wanting to create more stuff for them. I think before kind of Pricks, I would say my husband, my parents always kind of were the ones that be going. My husband definitely keeps me going now. Always very supportive and very encouraging. And I think it's so important to have great family around you and great friends that support everything you do. So definitely, yeah, my family and my friends. But yeah, it's now the type 1 community, which I hadn't really found until I made Pricks. I hadn't found that. And when I have like a difficult day, I speak the truth. On my social media, I'm not whinging about type 1 hardly ever on my social media, but if I do need a whinge about it, I will have a whinge. I'll do it in a way that I hope also kind of empowers others, like go, oh, I get it, and like just feel like they can relate. So I reach out to the type 1 community through my social media platforms if I'm having a difficult time. As I say, I always try to find the silver lining in every cloud. And there is always something. There is always a positive that comes out of a bad day, always. And I suppose my kids keep me going because I want to make them proud. think that's what it is.
That's a great take-home message. I would like to thank you very much for being here with us today. I wish you all the best in all your projects. Hopefully we will meet again to discuss another project, another play, another film. Yeah, thank you very much for being here.